Hello, everyone. It's so great to be in virtual community with you all. I hope you're all safe and well during these strange times. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for Climate Change in Farmland, Building a Resilient Future for Washington. I'm Melissa Campbell, the Executive Director of PCC Farmland Trust. While we had hoped to be in person tonight in beautiful town hall, we do feel incredibly privileged to still be able to gather in this virtual format this evening. We have over 1,000 people registered for this event from all over the state of Washington, as well as 32 states and even an attendee from Australia. And as we get underway this evening, I would first like to start by acknowledging that many of us here in the Seattle area are gathered on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, particularly the Duwamish, whose ancestors have resided here since time immemorial. Many Indigenous peoples thrive in this place, alive and strong, and we offer our deepest respect and gratitude to them and our many Indigenous neighbors throughout Washington state and across the US for their enduring care and protection of their shared lands and waterways. Thank you. And of course, this evening wouldn't have been possible without the support of our partners at Town Hall Seattle and our founder, PCC Community Markets, as well as Earth Day Northwest, Parsons and Company, the Hugh and Jane Ferguson Foundation, MIR, and our many other sponsors who provided their generous support this evening. PCC Farmland Trust has been around for 20 years, and since our founding, we have worked to protect and steward threatened farmland in Washington. For years, farmland's biggest threat was urban sprawl, and then slowly the pressures of a changing climate began taking a toll on our natural resources. And today, we're faced with a growing pandemic that puts our food supply, farm workers, and local businesses at risk. While we never ever could have predicted this moment in history, we're reminded of the importance of a resilient, diversified local food system in the face of dynamic change. And we believe farmers understand this best. But before you hear directly from those local farmers, I'd like to introduce you to our two very special guests, longtime food systems pioneers, Anna LePay and Frances Moore LePay. We are so honored to have them with us here this evening and in celebration of the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. After their remarks, I'll pass it over to KNKX Environment reporter Bellamy Palethorpe, who will moderate the conversation with our four local farmers. Each will share real stories about how their farms are being impacted by the current crisis and what resilience means to them. And if time allows, the farmers can answer a few audience questions at the end of the conversation. And you can ask questions anytime during the event by simply typing your question into the Q&A box in the Zoom window. And now, Anna LePay is a national best-selling author, respected sustainability advocate, and advisor to funders investing in food system transformation. Her latest book, Diet for a Hot Planet, The Climate Crisis, At the End of Your Fork and What You Can Do About It, was named by Booklist and Kirkus as one of the best environmental books of the year. A recipient of the James Beard Leadership Award, Anna is the founder or co-founder of 3 national organizations, including Small Planet Institute and the Small Planet Fund, which she launched with her mother, Frances. Anna currently co-directs Real Food Media, where she works to reveal the true costs of industrial agriculture and the power of sustainable food systems. Frances Moore LePay is the author of 19 books, including the 3 million copy Diet for a Small Planet. Her latest book is Daring Democracy, Igniting Power, Meaning, and Connection for the America We Want, co-authored with Adam Eichen. Frances is co-founder of Food First and Small Planet Institute, which she leads with her daughter, Anna. Frances is the recipient of 19 honorary degrees and the Right Livelihood Award, often called the Alternative Nobel. Together, the LePays will speak about our food system in the face of COVID-19, farming in the face of climate change, and how we can each harness our individual power to make real and positive change. Anna and Frances, take it away.
Thank you so much, Melissa. As you said, this is not the event that we imagined when we started planning this many months ago, but I am so glad that we turned it into a virtual gathering so we could still celebrate together. Since that first Earth Day, when 20 million people gathered, which was about 10% of the population at the time, we have learned so much more about our collective impact, the good, the bad, the ugly. We've seen how human beings are driving a crisis at a scale most couldn't have conceived 50 years ago, both the crisis of COVID-19 and climate chaos, as we radically remake the very natural systems on which we depend. We've also learned so much more about how the food system is a key driver of our environmental crises and how it can be a key solution. In this context, I want to start with what might seem a radical proposition: that our global food system can foster healthy communities, promote the well-being for all working along the food chain, and can be a source of environmental healing, promoting biodiversity and climate stability. This might seem like a radical idea because our current global food system is failing on all of these counts. But I and my mother have seen enough to know that another food system is possible. The farmers you will hear from later are bringing such a world to life, and the organization like PCC Farmland Trust, in partnership with so many of you, are helping them do so. So you may have heard motivational speakers note that the word crisis in Chinese is composed of two characters: danger and opportunity. Now, this may be the ultimate motivational cliche, but crises, while they always present never before seen threats, it is true that they are also often moments of huge opportunity. Well, tonight we are in the shadow of two planetary crises. Both expose the weaknesses of our current global food system and the urgent need to move to a nature-aligned, sustainable one. Could these crises be the wake-up that some people still needed to perceive how our collective fate is tied to the way we relate to nature, use the land, care for animals, treat farmers and workers who grow, process, and distribute our food? Could these crises be an opportunity to double down on a collective call for investing in food systems guided by nature? I certainly hope so. Part of turning a crisis into an opportunity, though, is to understand what the crisis reveals to us. When it comes to food and the climate crisis, we need to see how the food system is at once a climate casualty, a key culprit, but also central to the cure, the sort of 3 C's of food and climate. And here's what I mean. I'm sure the farmers that you will hear from later, like every farmer I have talked to recently, has already been impacted with extreme weather events and changing climate patterns wreaking havoc on their land. Farmers are certainly frontline casualties of climate change. But our corporate-dominated food system is also a key culprit. Why? Reliance on chemical inputs and fossil fuels for pesticides, fertilizer, packaging, transportation has not only destroyed biodiversity and plunged many farmers worldwide into crippling debt, it has also turned corporate chemical agriculture into a major greenhouse gas emitter. The huge expansion of industrialized animal agriculture has not only bred disease and driven massive air and water pollution, it has also turned that system into a huge source of emissions. A myopic focus on commodity crops, many of which feed those confined livestock animals, has not only resulted in unhealthy diets, it's also been the force behind as much as 80% of deforestation in some countries. Indeed, agriculture, forestry, and land use change produces nearly 1/4 of all emissions. And from seed to plate to landfills, the global food system is responsible for almost 1/3 of all man-made greenhouse gas emissions. I think of a Greenpeace banner I saw on Twitter earlier today that said, "Normal was a crisis." In the context of COVID-19, it's important to see how these trends are intertwined. On nearly every continent, agribusiness land grabs have pushed small farmers onto increasingly marginal land and indigenous communities off land that they've long stewarded. Those dynamics have brought wild animal populations, natural hosts for pathogens, into closer contact with humans. And scientists have warned it would only be a matter of time before those pathogens found new hosts, us. Indeed, evolutionary biologists and epidemiologists suggest that the industrialized food system has helped create the very conditions for outbreaks like this one. But there is another way. And the folks at PCC Farmland Trust know it. If you're tuning in, you might sense it too, that food and farming is also a key to the climate cure. Sustainable farming and a diversified, locally grounded food system is a cornerstone of resiliency and a low carbon future in the region where the trust works and for communities all around the world. Earlier this year, before COVID-19 made such a gathering impossible, I traveled to southern India with the Agroecology Fund for an international learning exchange where we brought together nearly 100 scientists, farmers, policymakers, activists. We met with indigenous Peruvian potato farmers and West African women rice farmers, indigenous livestock breeders, and sustainable farmers from the US. From every corner of the planet, we heard strategies for food system resilience and the policies and movements needed to defend them. Guided by principles of biodiversity, regeneration, and localization, the leaders that we heard from are part of a global call for agroecology, for the science and the on-farm practices and the social movements that support food systems working with nature. Agroecology, like the sustainable practices embraced by farmers you'll hear from, is based on promoting biological diversity, using natural methods for dealing with pests and weeds, boosting animal and crop health for maximum nutritional benefit and ecosystem restoration. Practices that also help build healthy soil, critical for keeping carbon in the ground and for creating resiliency to droughts and floods. So at that learning exchange in India, we heard from leaders from Kyrgyzstan, bringing together herders and geneticists to revive disappearing Aboriginal livestock breeds, finding that the genetic diversity was key to livestock that could handle the harsh climate in Central Asia. From leaders working in Burkina Faso with Groundswell International, we heard about communities impacted as the Sahara Desert encroaches, but also about the incredible results they've seen as they've worked with farmers to adopt agroforestry, mixed cropping of native species, rainwater harvesting, composting, and more. What they've found is that these techniques have helped farmers increase yields by 130% for staple crops like millet and sorghum, even in the face of the region's water scarcity. From advocates in Ecuador, we heard about a massive campaign for healthy, traditional indigenous foods promoted through farmers markets and direct-to-consumer efforts, similar to what we have here in the US and called CSAs or community supported agriculture. The goal for this network is to connect with 250,000 families across the country of Ecuador. We heard from grassroots farmers networks and women's self-help organizations in southern India, advocating for natural farming practices to prevent dependency on chemical inputs, and how, after decades of organizing, the government in the region is now supporting such a shift. Since 2016, the government of Andhra Pradesh has been investing, supporting farmers to make this transition. Today, 500,000 farmers have adopted what they call community managed natural farming. And the ultimate goal is that within the coming decade, 6 million farmers in the state will be brought on board. So while these incredible successes are not receiving the funding or the visibility they deserve, they are reflected in burgeoning public investments and acknowledgement of their value worldwide. More than a decade ago, the United Nations, in a report called Agriculture at a Crossroads, concluded that moving away from chemical pesticides to ecological farming would be essential to feeding the future. This year, the Convention on Biological Diversity will consider including agroecology in its biodiversity framework, and ministries of the environment and agriculture all around the world are increasing investments in sustainable farming as part of their post-Paris Agreement climate mitigation and adaptation plans. So the PCC Farmland Trust and the farmers you will hear from shortly are not alone. They are part of a truly global movement. The climate crisis and COVID-19 show us we cannot take our interrelationship for granted with each other or with nature. They're painful reminders that we must urgently rethink an industrial food system that ruptures these relationships and step up our efforts to support practices that restore and sustain them. Through nurturing regional food systems and supporting farmers on the front lines, groups like the PCC Farmland Trust are doing just that. And in the face of our global crises, helping feed our communities and strengthen our resilience. And for that, I thank them. Now, it is my huge, great honor to pass the virtual baton to one of my favorite people in the world, my mother, Frances Moore Lepay.
I love speaking with my daughter, you can imagine. I am very, very happy to be with you tonight. Now, however, I want to make a big shift. I want to really open the lens out, and I want to try to take us to the patterns behind the insights and the stories that Anna has shared with us. I want to see the big picture. And so I like to start with the square one question, really square one. Who are we anyway? I mean, we have gotten into a big mess, humanity has. And so I ask, is our species even capable of the awareness of connection to each other and the earth that Anna's stories were telling us, we're embodying? So my answer is that yes, both science and my own life experience, yes, tells me we can. And so I want to really make the case that Homo sapiens evolved with the awareness of our fate, even that our preservation depends on the well-being of us all. Now, Charles Darwin, he was often reduced to this very, very simple notion of survival of the fittest. It's pretty scary. But he, too, was clear on this point, and he said that in tribal peoples, that actions are regarded as good or bad solely as they affect the welfare of the tribe. And also that 18th century economist Adam Smith, who was reduced to the idea of the invisible hand of self-interest, kind of became the godfather of greed. Actually, he had a very deep understanding. He said, it is a precept of nature to love ourselves only as we love our neighbor. And which comes to the same thing, he said, as our neighbor is capable of loving us. So yes, we're wired for empathy. One little hint about that is that they found babies cry at the sound of other babies crying. Now, all of these traits, they bring also another instinct, I would say, that Adam Smith, remember the guy who's been sort of associated with self-interest, but he said, no, he said, in some peculiar manner, we are tied, bound, and obliged to the observation of justice. And on this sense of justice and fairness, it's clear that our species is not alone. That there's one amusing experiment that I love of capuchin monkeys who actually threw their food back to their caretakers when they saw that a neighbor monkey was getting a yummier treat. You can almost hear them muttering, no, not fair. Now, with all this promising emotional equipment, then how have we gone so wrong? Going almost to the unimaginable violations of these very sensibilities. I mean, after all, unfairness so extreme that in farming, as we now know, 3 corporations control more than half of the global seed sales, and the same is true with pesticides. Unfairness so extreme today that while the US ranks as one of the highest per capita income, nearly 1 in 6 of our kids lives in poverty, 2.5 million experience homelessness, and often with the only food their families can afford, so lacking in nutrition that it feeds the very high rates of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, limiting our lives. And now with COVID pandemic, we know that then makes the consequences of COVID even more damaging. So we come equipped with all this great stuff, cooperation, empathy, fairness. So how can this happen? This is the question of my life. How can we end up with a corporate-dominated food system that is impoverishing and polluting farmers, soil, water, the consumer, heating the planet so that we are losing 100 to 200 species a day? So here's my best guess, that we are in humanity's deepest crises because we humans are uniquely creatures of the mind, that actually our beliefs determine what we can see and what we cannot see. Now, Einstein put it pretty simply. He just said, it is theory which decides what we can observe. Now, sadly, over just about my adult life, half a century really, since I wrote Diet for a Small Planet, one story about who we are has been actively spread. It's sort of the opposite of the message of Diet for a Small Planet. Looking through the frame of this selfish frame, there are not enough goods, not enough food, not enough of anything. There's neither enough goods nor goodness. In humans, we think, oh my goodness, there's not enough of human, fellow feeling. Rather, it's selfishness, materialism, and competitiveness. Now, in this world of selfishness, amid all this scarcity, of course, we can understand how the highest value became freedom from others, freedom to compete against each other, because there's never enough for all of us. So the scarcity frame is really deadly. We're blinded from an understanding of freedom to actually participate in creating the communities with opportunities for all of us. We can't imagine government as our avenue to promote the general welfare. And actually, the preamble to our Constitution says that's what we're to be doing. That's what our nation is about, promoting the general welfare. So what happened? Now we know that dissing government has really dire consequences, because the anti-government dogma becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. What I mean by that, we end up electing a president who actually has now pulled back almost 100, precisely 95 environmental protections. Now, as government pulls back its protections for the general welfare, then, well, trust shrinks. Americans' confidence in government plummets from 77% in the mid-60s to 17% today. And what do we end up with? Not democracy answering to citizens, but with what I like to call, hate to call, privately held government answering to the wealthy. So in the early 70s, when this worldview became actively promulgated by business interests, in just one decade, the number of firms with lobbyists in Washington increased 14-fold. So today's agribusiness lobby, their lobbyists actually standing against everything that Anna was talking about, it's positive, now exceeds the defense industry's lobbyists. So we've gone from the 1970s, when Jimmy Carter could be elected president using public funds, to the 2016 election, costing more than $6 billion, paid mostly by a tiny percent of us. This worldview I call scarcity mind, deadly for life. It is dangerously malaligned with deepest human needs. Our need for voice, our need for meaning, our need for connection with others. So it's no wonder that as this worldview takes hold, that suicides worldwide take a greater toll every year than do national conflicts and homicide. So there is another way of seeing that Anna was suggesting. All these examples she was giving us, these powerful stories, aligned with who we are and aligned with the laws of nature. So I like to call it eco-mind. It's an ecological worldview characterized by, I think, of the 3 C's: connection, continuous change, and therefore we are all co-creators. It is breaking with the very failed scarcity mind. In this relational way of seeing, then the climate crisis can, as Anna says, become our opportunity for a big wake up. Now, the old mindset of separateness comes crashing as we experience, for example, the air we breathe as our commons, the soil that we grow our food in as our commons. We awaken to the essential need for government becoming our tool driven by, not by private wealth, but by citizens' voice and power. And in this emerging shift, hope starts in me, with one realization, that the nature of life is continuous change in which we're all connected, and therefore it is simply not possible to know what's possible. And that means we're free. We're free to go for the world we want. I realize I don't have to be an optimist, and certainly I'm not a pessimist. I declare myself a hardcore possibilist. I don't need certainty of success or even strong probability. Rather, as long as I sense that there is a possibility that my actions, that our actions together can make a difference, I'm going to keep going. I'll work with all my heart to build a food democracy aligned with the earth, with political democracy enabling all of us to experience power, meaning, and connection. I know it takes work, but hope is the great reward. And scientists now tell us that hope actually organizes our brains towards solutions. So hope is power. So let's together take that power and use it. So I thank you so much for this opportunity to share what is on my heart. And now I am excited to introduce environmental reporter, the independent community-owned radio, KNKX, Bellamy, Pailthorpe.
Well, thank you, Frances, and happy Earth Day, everyone.
Thank you.
What an act to follow, and what a delight to share this digital stage with the LePays, to be here tonight in the company of local farmers. I have to say, I couldn't say no when I was asked to moderate, because I really find that I admire so many of the values that I found many farmers have in common. So let's familiarize ourselves with tonight's panel. We're going to be hearing from Elizabeth Bragg of Long Hearing Farm. She grows small-scale organic veggies in Rockport, Washington. David Hackinson is with Jubilee Farms. He cultivates veggies and pasture-raised meat in Carnation. Linda Nunzig of 90 Farms produces pasture-raised lamb in Arlington. And Andy Wilcox of Wilcox Family Farms provides pasture-raised eggs from Roy. So let's get to know these fine folks a little bit with a quick warm-up question. I'd like to hear from you. What is your favorite thing about the farming life? And you can specifically relate it to your own farm. Also, if you feel like it, throw in your favorite vegetable. I was disappointed not to hear anyone voting for leeks myself. Let's start with Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My favorite vegetable right now is pea greens. They're very versatile. Salad, sauteed, delicious, and easy to produce in the spring. And my favorite thing about farming is that I get to feed people, and I get to have these beautiful, intimate relationships with plants.
Wonderful. David, how about you?
You know, we do a lot of different veggies and plants, and so what I really like about it is the diversity of all the different things I get to do. One of the things I get to do that's kind of fun is in October we do preschool tours. People come out, little kids come out and get pumpkins, and that's a lot of fun, you know, for October. But if I had to do it like November and December, it would get old after a while. So it's nice that, you know, you do it for a little while, and then, you know, there's always the next job. So on our farm, there's always kind of something else to do. Every season's got its own work. So I like that.
Great. Linda.
Hello. I think my favorite thing would definitely have to be the community. The agricultural community is so incredibly tight and loving, and they're there for you before you even know you need them.
Great. And Andy? He's unmuting himself. Andy, do we have you? All right, Andy, can you hear me? Andy. Okay.
Yeah,
Let's,
sorry about
there you
that.
are.
I think the biggest thing for me that I just love about the farming life is the ability to be creative. It seems like every day there's a new problem, a new challenge, and it kind of taxes you, but there's a lot of fulfillment in the fact that you can use new ideas, different processes, and just kind of use your abilities in that way.
Yeah, great. Let's stick with you, Andy, now and get right to the news. What is one way that the new coronavirus is affecting your business?
It's challenging. We lost approximately 40% of our sales. We sell a lot to universities and restaurants and hospitals and such, and just overnight that went away. I think we're pretty confident that we'll get over that. The biggest challenge that we just think about every day is how do we protect our workers? The chickens aren't stopping laying eggs, right? And we got to feed them, we got to take care of them. So I can't, both all the family members and then the workers, we have to be there with them. So that is a huge challenge. How can we protect everyone while still taking care of the chickens?
Elizabeth, how about you? How the coronavirus is affecting your business?
It is unfolding in such nuanced ways over time. At first, we didn't see kind of any difference, but like a lot of other new and beginning farmers in the state, we're seeing that, you know, we're a vulnerable population in general in terms of like how we relate to the food system, and now seeing like, for example, our farm, we rely at the center is our CSA, our farm share, and we sell a lot to the national park, and they may not have seasonal workers anymore. And so we potentially, one of our biggest drop sites may not have, you know, may only have like 5 folks. So that's one way. Yeah. But, you know, being in community with, I'm part of the Washington Young Farmers Coalition, and we organized a webinar, and, you know, we're seeing it unfold, you know, every day it's different.
Yeah, there's a lot of problem solving going on. David, how about you?
Well, initially, we have seen a little bit of a bump from for our CSA, a little bit more interest early on than we usually see. So there's been kind of that immediate like interest in local food as people see that the food supply is a little bit shakier than the full shelves, you know, 4 months ago would have you believe. But you know, there's also a little uncertainty in the future. So when I think about, like, I brought up pumpkin tours. You know, there's a chance in October maybe pumpkin tours are going to be not something preschools or kindergartens are that interested in doing. So I got to decide now. I'm going to grow the pumpkins. I always grow the pumpkins. So I hope, you know, it all works out. But, you know, maybe I'll have a lot of pumpkins in October.
Yeah. Linda, how about you? How is coronavirus affecting your business?
We've had a very strong increase in customers. They're coming as far away, hour and a half away, they'll drive. Just in the last couple of days, I've had multiple come from South Seattle, and they're saying, we want to meet the farmer that's growing our food. We want to know that we can buy meat directly from the producer. So they spend a lot of time, they ask a lot of questions, they stock up their freezers, and they say, we'll be back.
Oh. So Linda, what does resilience mean to you? This panel's about building a resilient future. So what does that mean to you?
Every farmer I know is a resilient farmer, and you have to be, because you have to be able to roll with whatever is going to be next. And it may be a hot, dry summer. You can't necessarily prepare for that. It may be a flood, and you've got to be ready for that flood, and just know that you're going to be out there cleaning everything up, and you're going to roll right into the next thing. So you can't not be resilient and be a farmer.
Andy, how about you, Andy?
For me, when I think about resilience and farming, it just all centers on our main farm just south of Seattle. And it's been in the family for 100 years, but we just see development going on all around us and the infrastructure, and then we're competing against these big mega farms in the Midwest. And so you have to think, how are you going to be resilient to keep this farm going for the next generation? I think the neatest thing, though, is we have the 3rd generation, and they tell stories about all the crisis and challenges they've made it. And so that really gives you confidence. That gives you that inner confidence that we're going to make it, and we're going to be able to pass this on.
Knowing what your elders have done before you. Wonderful. David, how about you? Resilience, what does that mean?
Well, I see it as, you know, if you have multiple kind of ways of selling what you grow and staying kind of, the ability to adjust is really important. Honestly, I always quote Marshawn Lynch, you know, the running back for the Seahawks. He used to have this commercial I would play on the radio where he said, I'm adjusting to the new environment, bringing the heat and busting through the line every day. And I think about that constantly. And I don't know why it stuck with me. They don't play that commercial anymore, but adjusting to the new environment is like what farmers do. And we do that literally with environmental changes. We get floods and famine and all kinds of problems happen, you know, in the scorching sun and the floods, and we adjust to it. We come up with a new way of doing what we're doing. So it's about being creative, and staying flexible in your mindset.
Mm-hmm. Great. Elizabeth, how about you? Resilience, what does it mean?
Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna echo a lot of what other folks have said and draw on what Francis said, that we're continuous change is what we are facing, and that's how it's always been. And I feel like adaptation, creativity, and as Linda pointed out, healthy relationships, strong relationships, being in community with each other, being as farmers, we can be a strong foundation also for our community. And so I think I've been stewing on this question a lot, and these are kind of, this is just, especially what Francis said about continuous change and adapting to continuous change really resonates with me.
Thanks for giving it thought. Let's stick with you for a moment, maybe the toughest question of the night, about climate change. This is a complex and far-reaching issue, as we all know. And I'm wondering if there are changes that you have made or ways in which you've had to adapt to be part of a local solution.
Yeah, the climate crisis is real. You can ask anyone, native, non-native, who are deeply connected to place, and they will tell you about a glacier that isn't there, a fish that is no longer in the water because it's too hot. Talk to any farmer and they can tell you a story about unpredictable weather. This climate change is absolutely going to be one of the biggest challenges. And, as we talked about COVID, and I feel like COVID really exposes many of the other crises that were not as visible to us as they are now. And we are going to have to be in right relationship with continuous change and adaptation.
Are there specific things that you've already done to address climate change?
We specifically, we get to farm in the floodplain of the Skagit River, and it is always going to be ever changing. But in terms of our access to water, we're committed to growing food and crops that are suited to our particular ecosystem. There's a lot that we do on the farm that I feel like is contributing to a more climate smart way of growing food. And we're just, we kind of just have to wait and see. That's really where we're at.
Great. David, how about you? Climate change and how it's playing out on your farm.
Well, I want to talk about what immediately happened this last winter. I think it was January and February, about 5 floods in a row. We're in a floodplain as well, and it's been a floodplain. It's not a surprise that we get floods. The surprise is when flooding happens constantly. I mean, I can count, there were probably 30 days out of this year where the water was either coming up, it was there, or it was receding, where my house was an island and I couldn't get out but on a rowboat. So when I see that kind of flooding and I look at the trend that it is unprecedented, it costs us financially. It costs us, kind of, there's an emotional toll to watching your farm going underwater every other day. I'm a farmer, not a fisherman, so I want to see the land, not the water. So there's a toll, and yeah, I guess that's just how I grasped with it immediately.
And is there a solution that you're working on for that, or is it still a work in progress?
Oh, man. Get better hip waders. That's my solution. No, I mean, on an individual level, there's not a lot we can do, but that's kind of what this whole Earth Day thing is about, right? Is collective action. So, getting people on the same page to how to deal with problems. I think this is the solution right here.
Great. Andy, how about you?
I was really fortunate about 7 years ago. We were able to use the Cool Farm tool for livestock, which is a tool that you can start measuring your carbon equivalents all the way from the feed you get to, for us, it was through how you raise the pullets, to the chickens, to the food miles that you are going to the store and all your packaging. And initially, I just thought it's all with your transportation. That's where the issues were, but it really took me by surprise. Lots of things like feed. If we fed our chickens more of a wheat base or peas versus just corn and soy meal, that had a big material effect. And then the other thing was our manure. How do we handle our manure? It really kind of opened my eyes to how we can farm and do things differently. So we've just been, over those 8 years, we've been continuing thinking about it. Recently, over the last 2 years, we've really invested most of our money into mobile pasture, and we have 350 acres that we're now taking our chickens, one barn over 10 acres, and actually moving the barn, every week. And so our hope with that is we could, with the rotational grazing, we could be sequestering carbon. And I think the thing I learned with the Cool Farm tool is measurement is so important to know what you're doing. And so we're going to we've contacted the University of Washington to potentially have a graduate student work with us. And we started measuring our organic matter in our soil. And so hopefully, we'll see these things, and this is something we can share with other farmers. But it's just, the one thing I've just learned is measurement is so important. The disappointment for me, though, I know there's a lot of universities working in this area, but I'll ask questions, and it's not real conclusive. As a farmer, you ask, well, is this better? Like in the manure handling, I said, well, what is the best way to handle the manure and nothing's necessarily real. I'm used to just kind of concrete answers and different things. And so I think there's still a lot out there for farmers to working with research to really know what are the best methods.
Great, interesting, thank you. Linda.
That's an easy one for us because we, like you've heard here, many of the other speakers, we farm in the floodplain and we farm livestock. We farm short livestock, which means every time that we flood, we need to evacuate all of our livestock. They're loaded up in multiple trailers and hauled out. This also happens around the same time as lambing season. So we do a scheduled lambing season. A few years back, we evacuated with 3 lambs on the ground. We came back with 42 lambs on the ground. So not an easy transition for the sheep at that point. So then we moved our lambing back a little bit so we would lamb later in the season. Floods started coming later. So then we moved it back again. Floods started coming later again. So 18 years ago, I bought my farm. I've had 6 100-year floods. So being able to manage when those ewes are bred and when they lamb is no longer controlled by markets or grass growth. It's now 100% controlled by when we could flood.
Wow. So let's stick with you, Linda, and talk about what the biggest risk factor is for farming now in your view, or the biggest opportunity.
Biggest risk factor is development. The pressures that development puts on agricultural land is so extreme. When you have a farmer, have somebody walk up to them and offer to pay them a tremendous amount of money for their farmland so that they can turn it into development, you can't compete. How do you compete with those kind of dollars when you're talking food production? The opportunity is exactly what PCC Farmland Trust does, and that's farmland preservation. Being able to have a purchase development rights program, a transfer of development rights program that can step in there and help that farmland to stay in production and still allow that farmer to get the monetary gains that he wants out of that farm is a huge opportunity and one that we need to keep on with.
Andy, how do you see this question? Biggest risk factor for farming or the biggest opportunity?
I think for us, it's both the risk and the opportunity, and that's just the younger generation, whether they're going to have an interest in farming. So I'm 4th generation. We're trying to develop our 5th generation right now. And how do we get them interested? How do we get them to want to dedicate their lives to this? And so, you know, we see that as a big issue. And so luckily we've had our first 5th generation family member come back, but it's a big challenge. And I think, you know, we've thought a lot about it. The 4th generation, the ones that are working now, really said, how do we get these people to want to work here and get interested? And so,
Elizabeth, oh, sorry, go ahead. I was just going to ask Elizabeth to follow up on that, since you are sort of the young generation, aren't you? Feel free to tackle it that way or talk about your own sense of what risk and opportunity is.
I mean, I was going to say the biggest opportunity is the next generation of kick-ass, awesome farmers who are ready to go, you know, and some of the biggest risk factors to those awesome, you know, the folks that I'm in community with through Washington Young Farmers and just like my farmer friends, they are the most brilliant, genius innovators and are just doing so much great work, not only on the kind of like ecological level, but also on the community level. And the biggest risk factors for those like farmer activists to have successful farming and food growing operations are climate change, systemic inequality, and barriers to entry. You know, I am so lucky to be in deep community with Ann Schwartz of Blue Heron Farm, who's my mentor, who's my land partner. Her support has meant everything to the farm. We would not be farming right now. We would, you know, and who knows how COVID would have affected us if we hadn't been cushioned by like the care that Ann has extended to us and our farm. You know, and that's the reality, that without that support and without that cushion, farmers like me would not be able to produce food for our communities. And so, you know, when you have climate change intersecting with systemic inequality, intersecting with high barriers to entry, intersecting with a food system that is not designed for small scale ecological food growing, you know, it's a lot.
David, how about you?
Well, I'm gonna jump on a phrase I heard there a couple times. Barriers to entry, high barriers to entry, and I gotta guess what she's getting at is what I've kind of heard before, which is land's expensive, and if you're a young farmer coming up with money to buy land, usable land that you can live on, it's a lot of money because you're competing against everybody else in this area to kind of get into it. So I'm lucky enough to be a 2nd generation farmer. And kind of having my dad kind of go through and kind of set a lot of things up for me to have a lot of success. So I'm really grateful for that. But I see a lot of other young farmers that are struggling to get that into it. Now, you know, one of the greatest opportunities is these relationships we can have. We're so close to an urban center of Seattle. I got an uncle that still farms the family homestead back in North Dakota in a town of 6 people. He farms like 3,000 acres. He's got no opportunity to do anything else but kind of grow commodities. He can't direct market really because there's no market there. Everybody's moved away. But in closest cities, right? So I'm talking pretty local right here. What's the opportunity and risk right here? Well, you know, great young farmers, getting them, that is an opportunity. And the risk is that they might not get the opportunity to fully express that self. But those people out there that we were just talking about are going to forge those great relationships with this larger community in Seattle that's starting to get hungry for local food.
Great. We are running out of time, so I'm going to skip to the final question and ask our panelists to be pretty brief if you can. David, let's stick with you. And the question's about just the fact that farming is incredibly hard work. It hinges on resources that are threatened. And so I'd like to hear what keeps you going, what gives you hope, or what keeps you up at night.
Wow. What keeps me going? Oh man, I've always wanted to be a farmer. So I'm living my dream right now. You know, like I've wanted my whole life since I was 6 to do this. I love driving tractors. I love taking care of animals and growing crops and just the creativity that's involved. So it's always a new adventure. I like to do, you know, kind of all the things that we did last year and then one thing that's new. I always want to do something new, and that's what keeps me going. And what keeps me up at night? Nothing. I sleep like a baby.
Elizabeth, how about you? You're smiling.
I love that. I also have like a deep, abiding love for being a farmer. I get to wake up and do my dream job every day. Every day there's like a simple joy or delight that I get to have and experience. Like a few days ago, some violas just like appeared at the edge of the field, and there they were, like this little beautiful gift. It was just amazing. And then, you know, I feel like on a larger level, I have like a deep commitment to a future that honors the lives of the children in my community. You know, what is their quality of life going to look like in the future? What kind of food will they eat? What kind of water will they drink? The air that they breathe. And I feel like our little farm is such a testament to that commitment on a day. It's a daily practice. You know, resilience is a daily practice. It's a discipline. It's a muscle. It requires care. It requires attention. But, you know, I really feel like it's a tool for us moving forward. So that's,
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. Linda, how about you?
So many answers there. I think that what keeps me going is, you know, you stand in the backfield and there's 40 acres of beautiful grass and you've got lambs grazing and you've got this silence out there and you're surrounded by incredible beauty that is the most calming and quiet place you've ever been. It's so serene. And then the hope is when you see somebody come to buy meat and they brought their kids with them from the city and they get out and they take a breath and they see animals, and the kids have never been on a farm before. They've never been able to just run, and they get to see the bottle babies and they get to walk around and experience what we oftentimes take for granted every day, that we get to live this kind of a life. But then what keeps you up at night, for me, I'm a first generation farmer. I bought my farm. I pay my mortgage every single month. And as a farmer, you don't know what's coming down the next day. You know, is it a flood that cost you 20 grand? You know, is it COVID that breaks out? Are there going to be customers? Are there going to be more? Are they going to be less? Farming has more unknowns than any other business you could possibly imagine, but it's worth it.
Great. And Andy, how about you? Last word.
For me, it's animal welfare. I grew up working in caged chicken houses, and I just knew down deep intuitively that wasn't right. And so, you know, when I was thinking about coming back to our farm, I said to myself, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to be part of commodity or, you know, have chickens in cages like they are. And so, I came back to the farm in 2005, and, you know, that's one of the first things I wanted to do. And initially my parents weren't, and the other people around the farm weren't for it, but finally they gave us a shot to do one cage-free, free-range house. And then as people just saw the natural behavior of the hens coming out, the cool thing is we got the whole company just kind of got behind this. And so it's been the last 15 years has been this journey of just constantly improving and getting out of cages. And now we're getting to the point where we're using, I think what is the best way for us to raise birds is with this pasture and the mobile pasture. And so just seeing that evolution is very fulfilling for me.
Thank you. And a warm thank you to all of our panelists. If we were in town hall as this was originally planned to be, I'm sure there would be thunderous applause. We have a lot of people attending virtually, and it's just so great to be able to get together anyway in this way. And I thank you very much. If you had questions that were not answered, please do email them. You can send them to farmlandtrust@pccfarmlandtrust.org. And we'll do our best to get some answers out there for you. And thank you, everyone. I am going to hand off now to Melissa Campbell. Thank you.
Thank you, Bellamy, and thank you so much to our speakers, to Francis and Anna and David and Linda, Elizabeth, Andy and Bellamy. And thanks to each of you all for choosing to spend your Earth Day celebrating the importance of local food and farms during the times and the moment that we're in as a globe. We believe in the power of soil, and the knowledge of farmers are some of the best solutions to our resilient future. And we hope you'll join us in our efforts to protect and steward threatened farmland for the long haul. After this event tonight, you'll receive an email outlining specific ways you can support a future for farming, because after all, it is essential. Consider a gift to PCC Farmland Trust to help us sustain our local food system. And thanks to an anonymous donor, all first-time gifts this evening will be matched up to $10,000. Also, be sure to buy direct from local farmers online and continue to support local arts institutions like Town Hall Seattle, who make conversations just like this one possible. We're wishing you all health in the days ahead. Thank you for being with us tonight, and take care.